Hi there, I'm the Myth Keeper. Welcome back to my channel, the best place on the internet for Pathfinder lore and history. This week we're going back to the Inner Sea region, and I think this is probably my second to last region deep dive. I think it's this and Five Kings Mountains to round out every single country in the Inner Sea, which is, I think, if I pat myself on the back here, a remarkable achievement. So much lore to get through. This is one that I've been saving for a long time. It gets requested a lot in the comments. It's Rahadoum. Rahadoum was pretty difficult to put together because Rahadoum never received a single source material book. So there's content here that's drawn from the first edition Inner Sea World Guide, the second edition Lost Omens World Guide, various guidebooks to things like temples and schools, and also Pathfinder Society content. I tried to accumulate as much Rahadoum info as I could in one particular place, and this is it, all of it together. Hope you all get some value out of it, and enjoy the video.
In a world shaped by gods and miracles, Rahadoum is a unique thing in Golarion, a nation where divine worship is not only discouraged, but outlawed. Rising from the ashes of a brutal religious conflict, Rahadoum chose a path few others dared, the complete rejection of the gods. Here, faith is seen not as a virtue but as a chain, an invitation to subjugation under divine whim. Instead, Rahadoumi pride themselves on reason, discipline, and self-reliance. Their guiding creed, the laws of mortality, upholds the principle that no mortal should be beholden to gods. Founded over 2 millennia ago after the devastating Oath Wars, Rahadoum emerged under the leadership of philosopher Kalim Onaku, who sought peace through secular governance. Since then, it has maintained an unyielding secular identity, enforced by the vigilant Pure Legion, and marked by a complex mix of innovation, hardship, and resilience. Despite its hardline stance against religion, Rahadoum is no grim theocracy of disbelief. Its cities are vibrant with philosophy, commerce, and art, its ports bustling with merchants from across the Inner Sea. Yet the land also hums with unseen tension. Celestials and fiends maneuver in the shadows, unseen by mortal eyes, while cults, famine, and monstrous threats quietly test the nation's resolve. And of course, the lack of divine healing spells mean that disease and plague are a scourge upon the land. To understand how we got here, let's take a deeper look at the history of Rahadoum. Our history begins in the twilight of the Age of Darkness, when the skies remained choked with soot, and only a few human tribes dared to venture out below the ash-strewn skies. Among these desperate tribes was one led by Tiandra, a shrewd and pragmatic war leader. Her people discovered the remnants of an Aslanti citadel on the coast of the Inner Sea. In its withering towers, a few forlorn Aslanti still clung to life, but Tiandra saw in their despair an opportunity. Her tribe swept through the ruins, driving out or killing the last of the ancient empire's torchbearers and looting the tower's various magical relics, artifacts and tomes unintelligible to their new masters. Though the tribe could not comprehend the magic scratches on the Aslanti scrolls, they recognized the power they represented, and hid them away in a sacred cave, waiting for someone who could. That someone would come a century later in the form of Ariston, a strange and gifted young man whose life would change not only his tribe's fate, but the fate of the entire region. Alongside his brother Ajanos, Ariston rediscovered the Cave of Tiandra and the treasures within. In a moment of tragedy and revelation, Ariston accidentally killed his brother during a fight, and whether through trauma, fate, or some supernatural awakening, Ariston gained the ability to read the Aslanti texts. He emerged from the cave transformed, with a mind ablaze with stolen knowledge and a hunger to learn more. Joined by his wife Mernura and his closest friend Venistos, Ariston built a ship and sailed the Inner Sea in search of wisdom. His odyssey brought him from the shadow-haunted valleys of Nidal to the stone-hewn sky citadels of the dwarves, and even to the outer plains, where he walked the perfect streets of Axis, the Eternal City. Over the years, he chronicled his findings in what would become the Polyhera, a monumental collection of journals blending observation, legend, and philosophical musings. These texts would later serve as the ideological and structural foundation of a new nation and empire. When Ariston finally returned home in -4120, he was no longer a lone visionary, but the leader of a movement. With scholars, warriors, and planar allies at his side, he oversaw the founding of the Jiska Imperium, a bastion of arcane order and human ambition in a world still finding its footing. The capital he named Mernura after his loyal wife, who also governed the city in its early days. It became the heart of a rapidly expanding empire. Ariston was proclaimed the first Imperantike, or emperor, and his successors would be chosen from among the Imperium's greatest generals and magistrates, confirmed by a high council of elite elders known as the Honorat. Jiska thrived with a rare fusion of planar diplomacy and mechanical innovation. Inspired by the inevitables of Axis, stoic enforcers of law and balance, Jiskan scholars developed a caste of artificers, masters of arcane engineering, who constructed sentient golems and bound elemental spirits to steel and stone. Meanwhile, magistrates, empowered by extraplanar pacts often had with genies, enforced imperial law and led vast armies of disciplined legionnaires across northern Garand and southern Avestan. But this duality of esoteric pursuit, artifice and elementalism, would become the Empire's curse as well as its strength. By minus 3800, tensions between the magistrates and the artificers had grown acute. The former, entrenched in politics and genie-backed warfare, saw themselves as the rightful stewards of the Empire. The latter, increasingly obsessed with their mechanized creations and arcane hierarchies, sought to reshape Jiska into a theotechnic meritocracy, ruled by invention and logic. Their competition with each other, though not yet open civil war, began to fracture the Empire's unity. The Honorat, once an august body of wise elders, was increasingly filled with cronies and sycophants. Beneath the Empire's glittering facade, dissent simmered, and the costs of expansion were mounting. Jiska's holdings were sprawling, its people diverse, and its legions overextended. Despite dire warnings from scholars and seers, the Empire pressed onward, fixated on conquest and acquisition. Trade routes stretched thin, foreign contacts grew wary, eastern neighbors, themselves on the rise, threatened Jiska's regional strategic dominance. Still, the imperial court ignored the warning signs. Eventually the foundation cracked. The ideological rivalry between artificer and magistrate evolved into sabotage and espionage. Golems clashed with genie-bound soldiers in regional skirmishes. Provinces broke from the central government or collapsed under misrule. Though no single movement marks the end of the Jiska Imperium, by the time rising powers like ancient Osirian began asserting themselves, Jiska had become a hollow empire, its glories reduced to ruin, its magics dispersed or buried beneath the sand. Over the next 3 centuries, the winnowing of the Jiskan's most able rulers eroded further into infighting, and then all-out succession wars, which finally spelled the Empire's ultimate doom. The rulers of ancient Osirian, with the help of their new allies among the Tekretanin League, either absorbed or obliterated the Gurundi holdings of Jiska, and those scattered peoples who did not submit to their new ruler's whims either perished or fled, leaving their once powerful imperium in shambles and its treasures and lore lost to history. The collapse of the Jiska Imperium left behind more than crumbling towers and buried forges. It left a power vacuum that would last for millennia. In the absence of central rule, the once proud imperial holdings splintered into a patchwork of fiercely independent city-states, each clinging to its autonomy and traditions. Much like their eastern neighbors in Thuvia, these coastal cities began to develop independently, driven more by mercantile ambition and local necessity than any shared cultural vision. For centuries, this decentralized state persisted, with no force strong enough or willing enough to unite the land. At this point, it becomes incumbent on us to discuss the movement of faiths during the land that would come to be known as Rahadoum. It is not known which deities were favored during the period of the Jiskan Imperium, but after the collapse, the growing predominant faith of neighboring Osirian would spread rapidly across the desert. This was the worship of the god Nethys, the arcane, who had helped found the empire before his ascension to godhood. Then, before the turn of the 3rd millennium, 2 other significant and surprising deities grew in popularity in the western deserts. The first was the worship of Achekek, and before the followers of the Red Mantis were exiled to Mediogalti Island, it was these lands that were the center of his worship. The second arrived on the shores of Rahadoum from the Empire of Taldor. In the year 1893, the second of the ascended gods emerged. The dark god Norgorber passed the test of the Starstone and became a deity, the first to achieve divinity in this manner since Aradin. Perhaps drawn by the fact that the god of assassins, Achekek, was already popular in Rahadoum, the secretive clergy of Norgorber made their way from the city of Vair in the Empire of Taldor south to Rahadoum to spread their strange new faith. About 500 years later, when Saranite missionaries from the new Kelishite-conquered kingdom of Osirian began to move westwards, they would inadvertently trigger the Oath Wars. In 2498 it began in earnest. The region was plunged into a long-lasting and destructive conflict. The Oath Wars had begun. This bitter series of religious civil wars ignited when the churches of Nethys, Norgorber, and Sarenrae, three gods with wildly divergent theologies, clashed across the cities of northwestern Garand. Each faith saw in the fragmented landscape an opportunity to bring their gospel to dominance, and each viewed the others as blasphemous obstacles. Over the next 6 decades, the region bled. Cities burned, temples rose and fell, and the people suffered under the weight of divine ambition. The breaking point came in 2555 when the city of Azir, weary beyond endurance, turned inward to find another voice to listen to. Under the guidance of a philosopher named Kale Monaku, the city's militia stormed the temples of all faiths, torching icons, casting priests into exile, and laying the foundation for a new ideology. Onaku's movement gave rise to the laws of mortality, a set of governing principles that forbade worship of any divine power. The first and most sacred of these laws was simple and absolute: let no mortal be beholden to a god. Within 5 years, other war-torn communities across the region joined Azir in embracing Onaku's secular vision, and from their ashes rose the nation of Rahadoum. The consequences of this godless revolution were far-reaching. The Red Mantis, a cult of assassins that had long operated within Rahadoum, was forcibly expelled and relocated to the island of Medjugorje, where they soon carved out a power base of their own. Another exile was Sauk, a devout astronomer-philosopher who had opposed the laws of mortality. In 2557, just 2 years after the ban, Sauk and his followers settled on Garand's stormy western coast, founding the nation of Lirgan, a refuge for those unwilling to forsake faith and a spiritual rival to Rahadoum for generations. Though fiercely independent, Rahadoum was not isolated. In 2606, the completion of the Arch of Aradin, a grand bridge connecting Avestan and Garand, ushered in a new era of trade. Rahadoum's port city of Kari, perched on the southern side of the arch, became a vital node in the commerce flowing between Rahadoum and Corentin, the Taldan city on the northern shore. Despite their differing religious views, prophets spoke a universal language, and for a time the two cultures flourished in cooperation. This balance would not last, as the Taldan Empire fractured in 4081, splitting into the old heartland of Taldor and the ascendant imperial state of Cheliax. New ambitions would emerge. In 4137, during the period of expansion known as the Everwar, King Haliad III of Cheliax sent troops across the Arch of Aradin and conquered Kari, bringing the port and its hinterlands under Chelish control. For nearly 4 centuries, Rahadoum was denied access to one of its most strategic cities, while Cheliax claimed both sides of the Hesperus Strait. Then came the death of prophecy in 4606, a turning point not only for Rahadoum but for the entire world. The unexpected death of Aradin, god of humanity and patron of both Taldor and Cheliax, sent shockwaves through the cosmos. In Rahadoum, it was seen as a grim vindication. The gods were not eternal. The divine could die. As Aradin perished, so too did the prophecies that had once guided the faithful, and across Galarian chaos erupted. Nowhere was this upheaval more violent than on Garand's western coast. From the churning storm birthed by Aradin's death emerged the Eye of Abendego, an unrelenting hurricane that surged endlessly in the sea. Lirgan and Yamasa, nations founded by Rahadoumi exiles and scholars, were destroyed by storm surge and flooding, their lands transformed into the Sodden lands. Many who survived the catastrophe, especially among the Lirgani, fled northwards. Ironically, their path led them back to the land of their ancestors. Rahadoum, bound by principle, but not devoid of compassion, took in thousands of storm refugees. A secular Rahadoumi order known as the Knights of Salvation emerged in the aftermath, dedicating themselves to the noble mission of rescuing refugees still trapped in the Soddenlands. Rahadoum, for all its strictures, has never ceased to be pragmatic. This was proven again in 4716 during the Hell's Vengeance crisis in Cheliax, when the nation was consumed by internal rebellion. The Glorious Reclamation, a zealous faction of Iomedes' followers, rose up in southern Cheliax, offering Rahadoum a rare opportunity. Seizing the moment, Rahadoumi forces launched a swift campaign to retake Kari, casting out the Chelish garrisons and reclaiming the city. With Kari once again Rahadoumi, control of the southern side of the Hesperus Strait returned to secular hands. Now, in the current era, Rahadoum stands as a paradox of history, born from war, tempered by secularism, and still adapting to the tides of fate. Its people remain resilient, skeptical, and fiercely loyal to the principles that define their national identity. While the gods still watch from afar, their voices find little echo here. According to the people of Rahadoum, the only divine right is the right to be free. The culture and politics of Rahadoum. Though Rahadoum presents itself as a unified nation under the laws of mortality, in practice it remains a federation of proud, independent city-states and nomadic communities. This fragmented nature is a legacy of the region's long pre-national history, stretching back to the fall of the Jiska Imperium and the thousands of years of autonomous urban development that followed. Each major city, Azir, Maniket, Botasani, and others, retains its own traditions, priorities, and political identity. The National Council is made up of representatives from each of these cities and tribes, ensuring that Rahadoum remains as much a coalition as a country. While the Council does elect a central figurehead known as the Keeper of the First Law, the real power of governance remains relatively decentralized, and it is common for local matters to be resolved at the city level with minimal interference from the state. This decentralization, however, is counterbalanced by the omnipresent enforcement of Rahadoum's core philosophy, the rejection of divine worship. That task falls to the Pure Legion, a disciplined military and ideological organization charged with safeguarding the laws of mortality. The Pure Legion is not just a police force, it is a secular priesthood of sorts, devoted to the maintenance of reason and the suppression of faith in all its forms. They are empowered to conduct searches, seize contraband, and punish those who would violate the first law. They operate independently from any local government, reporting directly to Shepherd's Rock, their mountain fortress and headquarters. Their loyalty lies not with any city-state, nor indeed even with any political leader, but with the law itself, a fact that makes them both respected and feared throughout Rahadoum. Despite this austere oversight, Rahadoum is not a joyless or oppressive land. In fact, civic engagement is deeply ingrained in Rahadoumi culture. Citizens are highly educated in public discourse, particularly in the realms of philosophy, politics, and ethics. It is not uncommon to find impromptu debates in cafes and tented markets, where thinkers argue about the proper balance of personal liberty and social obligation, the ethics of arcane experimentation, or the future of the nation's water reclamation efforts. Without divine intermediaries, the people place a high value on their mortal responsibilities to family, to community, and to reason. Self-discipline is prized above all, but so too are wit, skepticism, and rhetorical skill. Morality in Rahadoum is considered a matter of individual and familial conscience, rather than religious dogma. Practices that would be condemned elsewhere, such as the relatively accepted use of narcotics, are not uncommon, but they are expected to be handled with a degree of discipline and decorum. Sloppy behavior, whether in addiction or social disorder, is frowned upon. In this way, Rahadoumi culture walks a line between personal freedom and social expectation. One is free to live as one wishes, as long as one does not undermine the structure of the secular society. At its heart, Rahadoum is a nation shaped by shared belief and unbelief. It is a society that has chosen self-reliance over supplication, reason over revelation. And while the city-states may disagree on policy or trade, they remain united in their conviction that mortals must govern themselves, by their wits, their will, and their hard-won wisdom. A look at the culture of Rahadoum would not be complete without taking a moment to discuss the country's various non-human communities as well. These include the Varanoi desert elves and the lion-like Shemtej catfolk. Both of these are nomadic desert peoples who don't recognize national boundaries and who are found here just as they are found in Thuvia and in Osirian further east still. More details on the Varanoi and the Shemtej can be found in my Thuvia region deep dive. One additional unique non-human culture here not found in the other realms are the Vahird dwarves, who are described in more detail in the Gazetteer section entry about the Eternal Oasis, where they live. The Rahadoum Gazetteer. In sequencing the Gazetteer section for this video, I've decided to move from southeast to northwest, starting in the most remote border stretches with Thuvia and culminating in the politically dynamic city of Kari on the opposite side of the Hesperith Strait from Cheliax. Deech's Gambit. Near Rahadoum's southeastern border, the barrier wall mountain range bifurcates around a low mountain valley known as Deech's Gambit. Through this valley, one can reach the source of the eastern fork of the Mbembe, making it a useful crossing, but it does require the passage through a dangerous mountain trail that cuts across the southern barrier wall. Rahadoumi merchants, Thuvian merchants, and merchants from the independent city-state of Jaha, discussed in my Mwangi Expanse videos, have learned to brave the trail over the last 10 years, making use of the Mbembe River to ferry goods between Jaha and Rahadoum. The Jahans, who were themselves Lurgeni exiles, and the people of Rahadoum have a lot in common, including a shared ancestry dating back to the days of the founding of Lurgan in the wake of the Oath Wars. The Vale of Burning Stars. After the fall of the Jiska Imperium, the Empire of Osirian would eventually also conquer the Tekratanin League, which controlled the lands between Jiska and Osirian. The border of the old empire therefore stretched all the way west, encompassing a great stretch of Rahadoum today. Here, in the most remote stretches of the empire, the pyramids of the Hirkoshek dynasty of pharaohs can be found. This cluster of pyramids came to be called the Vale of Burning Stars, and treasure hunters soon learned that the Hirkoshek pharaohs were fond of using magical traps to protect their tombs. Unlike most eastern pyramids, the Hirkoshek pyramids have therefore not been extensively plundered. The Tomb of Emperors. Located not far from the pyramids of the Hirkoshek dynasty lie the Tomb of Emperors, majestic ruin of ancient Jiska Imperium, built at the lush oasis of Zarapsian. Originally constructed to honor Imperentike Ereliskos, the empire's fifth ruler, after her victory and death in a decisive battle at Zarapsian, the site became a symbol of Jiscan might. The tomb once housed treasures crafted by renowned Jiscan artisans, and attracted so much reverence that entire nomadic legions joined the Imperium in its wake. Though much of the upper tomb was looted by invading Osirians and their divine allies during the period of their great conquest, the lower levels and catacombs remain relatively untouched. Today, it, and the Osirian pyramids slightly further to the south, remain dangerous destinations for pathfinders based out of the Swordmeat Lodge in Maniket, who seek to explore its depths in search of lost relics and forgotten lore. Lost Yamal. Hidden in the southeastern Napsun Mountains near the mouth of the Uta River, Lost Yamal was once the southernmost outpost of the Jiska Imperium. As the Tekratanen League and ancient Osirian overran Jiscan territory, imperial leaders entrusted a team of priest artificers and high magistrates with transporting their most sacred relics, contained within a single massive chest known as Jiska's Hope, to a fortified tomb beneath Yamal. The mission failed in tragedy. Ambushed at the tomb's threshold, the defenders and their pursuers alike were sealed within, as the great brass door slammed shut behind them. Those who fled the city claimed to hear horrific screams from within, as deadly magic consumed all inside. Locked behind its massive fortress gate, the tomb has endured all these long years, untouched and impenetrable, still guarding its legendary contents beneath the mountain stone. Haldun. The city of Haldun had long sat at the crossroads between the nations of Lirgan and Rahadoum at the only viable pass between the Napsun Mountains, and its gates for a long time were always open, as caravan traffic was almost continuous. At the cataclysmic opening of the Eye of Abendego, many Rahadoumi people lost relatives in the disaster. In this period, Haldun became the place of origin of the Knights of Salvation, who dedicated themselves to rescuing refugees in the south. To navigate the treacherous hurricanes and reach the survivors, these knights constructed a network of interconnected way stations. When their resources allowed, the knights employed enduring magical means to construct these stations, resorting to elevated stone bunkers when faced with limited funding or dwindling magical supplies. In the beginning, each station was meticulously linked to the next through ropes or chains. By grasping the chains and tracing its path, a refugee could traverse the blinding storms, or knights could transport essential supplies or crucial information to the subsequent station deeper within the tempest. In this way, the knights were able to get a great many of the northern Lirgani out of the country and to safety in Rahadoum. It has been 100 years since the death of prophecy, and today, outside of Haldun, the order has largely disbanded, but some still try and maintain the resilient shelters they built or catalogue their history in the city. Also, in recent years, Haldun is no longer the thriving trade city it once was. Instead, it is a fortress town, a critical part of what the Rahadoumi now call the Rain Wall, the protective barrier that prevents dangerous Boggart tribes and other threats from the Sodden Lands from advancing northwards. The Hanging City of Teskra. One of the most remote and haunting ruins of the ancient Jiska Imperium, suspended over a canyon near the headwaters of the Winding Way River in the southeastern Napsun Mountains. Commissioned in -3429 by Emperor Rakiendos as a luxurious frontier outpost near the route to the Eternal Oasis, Teskra was a marvel of arcane architecture. Its terraces and chambers hung upon chains of mage-forged iron and illuminated by cunning magical design. Below it sprawled the pleasure gardens, an artificial menagerie of clockwork animals programmed to mimic life. Jeweled leopards, parrots, and even aquatic serpents roamed lifelike, but entirely fabricated. Despite its brilliance, Teskra's legacy is one of decline and mystery. Emperor Rakiendos himself vanished under strange circumstances, following a week-long festival in the gardens, his fate whispered about but never confirmed. Over time, citizens began disappearing, sometimes following escaped mechanical creatures, other times without cause. Eventually, Teskra was abandoned entirely, its people wandering into the mountains, leaving behind only silence and rusting gears. Today, the city's only inhabitants are the surviving clockwork beasts and a sentient wax golem named Advindi, who appears to rule the dead city. She and her artificial kin linger among the ruins, their purpose unclear. They have, however, not always been unwelcoming of explorers bold enough to seek them out. The Eternal Oasis. Among the most intriguing of Rahadoum's many peoples, the Vahird are a sect of Ergaxan dwarves who follow a monastic lifestyle and dwell within the lush and humid confines of the Eternal Oasis. Isolated from the arid plains and city-states that dominate the rest of the nation, the Vahird have carved out a life of contemplative simplicity in one of the most beautiful locales in all of Garand. Their homeland is a marvel, a verdant anomaly in the desert, sustained by thousands of freshwater springs and ringed with dense groves that seem untouched by time or climate. Many whisper that the oasis itself is protected by ancient magics or even sentient trees. Though dwarves across Golarion are often deeply religious, with strong ties to deities such as Torag and his family, the Vahird follow the laws of their homeland and do not worship the dwarven gods. They do not deny the divinity of the gods, though. Indeed, their ancient records and oral traditions acknowledge the pantheon clearly, but they reject the notion that divinity equates to moral or spiritual superiority. In their view, a god is simply a powerful being, not a rightful ruler. This philosophy places them in perfect alignment with Rahadoum's laws of mortality, and the Vahird are among the nation's most ardent defenders of secularism. Life among the Vahird is quiet, orderly, and introspective. Their society is based around egalitarian monastic communes, where labor, learning, and governance are shared responsibilities. They are vegetarian by custom, viewing the consumption of animal life as a form of domination, incompatible with their beliefs that no being should hold inherent authority over others. While they are not pacifists, many Vahird train in martial arts for self-defense or to protect their borders, and they regard violence as a last resort, a grim necessity in a world of difficult circumstance. Despite their secluded lifestyle, the Vahird are not isolationists. They regularly send emissaries and scholars to Rahadoum cities, and their philosophical texts are highly regarded in the academies of Azir and Maniket. Their artisan craft tools and instruments of remarkable elegance, often using locally sourced materials from the oasis, are prized throughout the region. Trade caravans, though sparse, occasionally make the dangerous journey through the desert to purchase Vahird glasswork, sculpture, or woven textiles, each a silent expression of their monastic idealism. Hapkani. Once a modest but thriving settlement in western Rahadoum, Hapkani has seen a steady decline as desertification consumes the surrounding farmlands. Yet it remains known for one enduring claim to fame, the mysterious vault of Hakan Mutalib, a brilliant and eccentric clockworker who died in 4520. Before his death, Mutalib constructed an elaborate mechanized tomb inside a nearby mesa, filled with puzzles, traps, and constructs meant to challenge and educate his descendants, who tragically died out before unlocking its secrets. Today, the mesa still draws curious adventurers and engineers hoping to unravel the inventor's legacy. The vault is defended by a host of mechanical guardians, including the ageless dervish, clockwork soldier that patrols its only known entrance. Within, entire rooms shift on massive clockwork pistons, only becoming accessible when puzzles are solved. The uppermost chamber holds Mutalib's most prized possessions, unfinished schematics stored inside a complex urn, protected by a golden construct of his own making. Though Hapkani itself has faded, the vault remains a testament to one man's obsessive genius, and the lost potential of a lineage that never came to be. The Jagged Reach. The Jagged Reach is a cluster of islands located at the southwestern end of Rahadoum, the most notable of which is Fahalan Island. On the southern shore of Fahalan Isle, before the Oath Wars, there was a temple consecrated to Desna and a lighthouse called the Guide Star. It served as a guiding light for ships navigating the Sand Coast Reach. The priests who maintained it were among the last religious figures in Rahadoum to be exiled. Secular forces took control of the lighthouse towards the end of the wars, but they actually all perished during a severe winter plague. However, the Guide Star has continued to function to this day, guiding ships traveling the treacherous waters around the Eye of Abendego. The reason for this is that the lighthouse has come to be occupied by the disembodied spirit of a dead dragon, the ghost of the dragon Megara. More details on Megara and her relationship with the bronze dragon Rokier of Motako Island can be found in my Dragon Creature feature. Nuat. Situated about 50 miles off of Rahadoum's western coast, opposite the city of Botasani, the island of Nuat serves as both a strategic naval outpost and a key agricultural holding for the nation, as so much of Rahadoum is desert. Here, however, the flat sea-level terrain and frequent warm rains make it the most fertile region in Rahadoum, with much of the island devoted to fishing and crop cultivation. Nuat's farms provide a vital food supply to the mainland, especially the nearby capital of Azir. Militarily, Nuat is also critical to Rahadoum's defenses against the pirate factions of the Shackles and Medjugorje. The Rahadoumi navy maintains a significant presence on the island, heavily patrolling the surrounding sea lanes to deter smuggling and piracy along the routes to Azir. Despite this martial presence, Nuat's inland people are simple farmer folk, known for their superstitions, most famously their belief in the Thin Men, eerie spirits said to haunt the island's cane fields. The Pure Legion turns a blind eye to these local tales, provided they don't cross into outright religious practice. Recent rumors also suggest the presence of a sunken Sedakthi city off of Nuat's western coast, based on inscriptions discovered by a Pathfinder vessel. The Sedakthi were called the Sahagan in previous versions of the game. Botasani. Perched on Rahadoum's western coast along the Arcadian Ocean, Botasani is a bustling port city that serves as a regional commercial hub. Located quite close to the capital, it is unfortunately a place where a lot of illicit trade occurs, outside the normal channels, and thus a persistent thorn in the side of the Pure Legion. Recent whispers of a secret-spreading Church of Iomedae here have also gained enough traction to alarm the authorities. The Pure Legion, already strained by a spreading famine, has so far lacked the resources to fully crack down on this, and is rumored to be seeking outside agents for aid. The city's troubles don't end with it being a hotbed for secret religious worship. Botasani has suffered through 3 devastating plagues in the last 50 years, and sits uncomfortably close to the Eye of Abendego, making it a frontline target for Shackle's pirates. Naval pilots and guides are in high demand here, as the Rahadoumi Navy struggles to defend its shipping lanes from pirate raids. Beneath the surface, Botasani also hides one of the region's most notorious black markets, the Sword Pit. This market specializes in divine relics and contraband, where cultists of gods both good and evil cooperate in defiance of Rahadoum's laws. Ironically, the market thrives thanks to a diversionary tactic they employ. It operates and runs smaller, more visible black markets in mundane goods to distract the Pure Legion's attention, while sacred icons and illicit magic change hands just out of sight. Azir, capital of Rahadoum. As the capital of Rahadoum and the birthplace of the laws of mortality, Azir is both the ideological heart and commercial engine of the Kingdom of Man. Located near the mouth of the Winding Way River on Garen's northwestern coast, it is the largest and busiest port in the country, serving as the primary point of entry for traders, scholars, and foreign agents alike. Often called Port Godless by outsiders, Azir is a city where secularism is not only law but identity, etched into its founding principles and woven through every level of public life. Despite its social strains, Azir has thrived economically. It benefits from the fertile imports from Nuat, the island to its west, which supplies the bulk of the capital's food and houses a significant portion of the Rahadoumi navy. The city's ports are always heavily trafficked, with trade flowing freely to and from destinations across the inner sea. The Aspis Consortium, always quick to sense a profit, has established its regional headquarters here, eager to capitalize on Rahadoum's blend of innovation and legal stability. The absence of religious bureaucracy also makes Azir an attractive base of operations for inventors and arcane researchers, particularly those exploring alchemical or mechanistic approaches to magic. Politically, Azir remains the stronghold of the Pure Legion, whose presence is felt at every level of civic life. The Legion's headquarters lie elsewhere in the fortress of Shepherd's Rock, but their grip on Azir is unshakable. It is here that the battle against underground religious activity is most visible. Numerous cults, some ancient, some newly formed, vie to reintroduce faith into public life. They are met with swift surveillance, raids, and ideological countermeasures by the Legion. Yet paradoxically, Azir also serves as a neutral ground for clandestine negotiations between celestial and fiendish agents. Without a dominant mortal religion to influence the field, divine servitors find the city a suitable arena for maneuvering and diplomacy, though their conflicts occasionally manifest in subtle, unsettling ways across the city. Shepherd's Rock. Perched atop a remote cliff in the Napsoon Mountains, Shepherd's Rock is the command center of the Pure Legion, Rahadoum's elite secular enforcers. Though its name may sound benign, the fortress is one of the most secure and intimidating locations in the nation. It operates both within and outside the Rahadoumi government, answering only to the first law, and serving as a bastion against any resurgence of divine influence. The fortress is home to the Vault of Lies, a sealed archive containing thousands of confiscated religious texts, artifacts, and symbols. These are not simply locked away but studied in detail to better equip the Legion in its ongoing battle against religious subversion. From this citadel, the Order's commander, Karsakim, also known as the First Sword of Man, surveys the desert with unshakable vigilance. Should insurrection arise, his forces stand ready to act with speed and fire, ensuring that Rahadoum's godless foundations remain intact. Mount Gata King. Deep in the central Napsoon Mountains of Rahadoum, Mount Gata King is infamous as the lair of Kanjar Kanar, a terrifying Zahak, known more widely as the Stone Maw. Zahaks are a monstrous draconic breed, massive serpentine creatures cloaked in malevolent darkness, distinguished by their horned draconic heads, massive rock-rending claws, serpent appendages sprouting from their shoulders, and large vestigial wings. Though Zahaks are typically agents of destruction and tyranny, Stone Maw is a patient anomaly. Stone Maw was placed on Gata King by Araman, the Lord of the Divs, and ordered to remain until a prophesied ruby wing would appear, a creature or foe he is said to be destined to destroy. For decades he has remained coiled in silent vigilance, attended by a secretive circle of Usige, div-worshipping ascetics, who ensure his needs are met as he awaits his divine purpose. Though dormant for now, his presence casts a long shadow across the region. Jaizoon Citadel and Deep Sky Fortress. In the waning days of the Jiska Imperium, the elementalists of Jaizoon Citadel in central Rahadoum sought to repel eastern invaders, particularly the advancing forces of Tekkertanen and ancient Osirian, by drawing upon their devastating elemental power. Their desperate experiments destabilized the boundary between planes, creating a rift of uncontrolled elemental energy and transforming the site into what became known as the Citadel of the Weary Sky. The disturbance eventually attracted the attention of Araman, Lord of the Divs, who expanded the rift and obliterated the citadel in a catastrophic elemental storm. Fleeing the citadel's destruction, surviving Jiskan elementalists and artificers relocated to a secretive mountain stronghold, the Deep Sky Fortress, carved into a vast cavern in the Napsoon Mountains. Named the Deep Sky because its magically glamored ceiling mimicked the sky above the mountains, it was built with the forced labor of 4 bound genies, each representing a different elemental plane. But the fortress was doomed from its inception. In secret alliance, the genies sabotaged their captors, turning the fortress's golems against the Jiskans upon the structure's completion. The resulting massacre left Deep Sky abandoned and buried in legend. Centuries later, the Pathfinder Society uncovered the ruins of Jaizoon Citadel, which in turn led them to the long-lost Deep Sky Fortress. The events of these discoveries and their deeper mysteries unfold in the Pathfinder Society adventures The Heresy of Man and Refugees of the Weary Sky. Deromas. The ruins of Deromas can be found on the banks of the Uta River. After the fall of the Jiska Imperium, ancient Osirian expanded westwards to conquer the lands of the Tekkertanen League and expand even into the former Jiskan holdings. One important Osiriani city in the west was Deromas. Little is known of the city today, beyond what can be gleaned from the archaeological evidence. Reports suggest it was a lawful and orderly city. Bika Rano Island. Located just off Garen's northern coast in the inner sea, Bika Rano Island is the easternmost holding of Rahadoum, lying west of Thuvia's Wyvern's Roost. Though largely quiet and unremarkable in strategic terms, the island is known in firebrand circles for its most unusual resident, Carthaval, an ancient dragon who now travels with a crew of the 3-masted frigate Vibrant Wave. Originally a recluse who spent much of his life studying among the scholars of Manaket's Ocularium, Carthaval grew isolated in his later years, retreating to Bika Rano and losing contact with his old friends. That changed when Jessima dis Villaris, an Undine captain and former Rahadoumi, befriended the dragon during a stop at the island. After 3 days of drinking and storytelling, Carthaval joined the firebrand crew of the Vibrant Wave, finding a renewed sense of purpose. Now Carthaval can be seen regularly soaring above the ship, or often perched atop its topmast, and occasionally visiting other firebrand factions across the inner sea. His widespread social network of informants and friends has earned him a nickname among fellow rebels, the Dragon's Voice, a living conduit for news, gossip, and alliance building among the firebrands. The Cave of Tiandra. Northeast of modern-day Manaket, along Rahadoum's inner sea coast, lies the legendary Cave of Tiandra, a place deeply tied to the early history of the Jiska Imperium. Though it appears at first to be a simple grotto, the cave hides a sprawling subterranean maze of narrow passages, dome-ceiling chambers, and sheer drops, forming a vast network beneath the hillside. This cave is famously where Ariston, the first emperor of Gisca, is said to have discovered the Aslanti relics that sparked his rise and the foundation of the Imperium. The presence of rare chrismals suggests that the cave once hosted extraplanar connections as well, possibly to the plane of Earth, which may explain Ariston's sudden comprehension of the ancient Aslanti texts. However, further exploration has been hampered by the emergence of dangerous subterranean creatures, most notably cloakers and monstrous fungal entities that now infest the deeper chambers, halting archaeological efforts and turning the cave into a hazardous, if historically vital, mystery. Kasaba Heb Amar. Perched atop 100-foot cliffs overlooking the inner sea, Kasaba Heb Amar is an ancient Rahadoumi fortress, known as much for its scenic views as for its shadowy reputation. Historically the seat of the influential El Makra family, the fortress has long doubled as a smuggler's haven, offering discreet passage for goods and contraband seeking to bypass Rahadoum's strict tariffs and religious bans. The sprawling compound features interconnected buildings, winding corridors, and at least 2 open courtyards, making it easy to navigate discreetly and difficult to surveil. Just beyond its outer walls lies a dense orange grove, lovingly maintained by the El Makra family, but also cleverly used to mask the movement of illicit cargo. While officially part of Rahadoum's lawful nobility, the fortress and its owners maintain a delicate balance between loyalty to the nation and a quiet defiance of its most rigid controls. Wadi al-Hesr. This coastal Rahadoumi village was where venture captain and Magnamarian privateer Retief van Schuyver worked hard to covertly sneak Agosa Agian, an Osirian cleric of Sarenrae, into the country to assist in combating the night plague that troubled its populace. The details of this are played out as part of the Heresy of Man Pathfinder Society adventure series. Maniket. Where Azir is Rahadoum's beating economic heart, Maniket is its restless mind. Situated on the nation's northern coast along the inner sea, this historic port city has long been regarded as the intellectual capital of Rahadoum. Once famous for its lush, vibrant gardens, Maniket now contends with a far grimmer landscape, one defined by the creeping desert. The gardens, once a symbol of cultivated refinement, have started to vanish under the advancing sands, leaving the city's scholars and spellcasters with a stark and daily reminder of the limits of their power. Despite these losses, Maniket has remained resilient, channeling its energy inwards, into thought, theory, and magical innovation. Central to this intellectual ecosystem is the Ocularium, one of the most prestigious arcane academies in the Inner Sea. Known especially for its cultivation of arcanists, alchemists, and esoteric engineers, the Ocularium values experimentation over tradition and has become a hub for magical reform and progressive philosophy. The college itself is built atop ancient Aslanti clockwork catacombs, a foundation that serves as both a literal and metaphorical base for its blend of innovation and heritage. Here, students and professors delve into relics of the Gisca Imperium, unearthing long-lost spells and combining them with contemporary arcanist theory to produce startling breakthroughs. The Ocularium is naturally not content to merely observe as its home city is slowly swallowed by sand. Its wizards and researchers are actively engaged in an ambitious project to reverse the desertification through an engineered network of shifting trenches and arcane barriers designed to repel the encroaching dunes. In this effort, they've partnered with mechanical engineers from Alkenstar, whose mastery of steamworks complements Rahadoum's arcane expertise. Even local brass dragons, notably Sarathil, discussed in my Thuvia video, and Carthavel, discussed in my section on Biko Rano Island, have lent their wisdom to these efforts. There are many prominent thinkers currently working at the Ocularium, but few have garnered the international reputation that Cassie Azaril has, a pioneering figure in secular healing whose insistence on science and alchemy over divine magic revolutionized medical care in a country where faith-based healing was forbidden. Her discoveries, including the cultivation of Candlerae, a rare deep-sea algae with remarkable restorative properties, have saved countless lives in Rahadoum, especially on the battlefield and in remote settlements where magical healing was not an option. Cassie famously studied under the famed alchemist Articus Kirin and earned degrees from multiple prestigious universities across Galarian. After traveling the world to refine her techniques, she returned to Rahadoum to continue her research under government support at the Ocularium. In 4708, after scholars in Taldor and Kadira plagiarized her findings, the Rahadoumi state publicly defended her authorship and elevated her social standing by adopting her into the noble Azaril clan, granting her the name Cassie Azaril. Though her methods are often difficult to replicate, particularly due to her guarded approach to sharing her Candleray derivatives, her innovations in battlefield triage, disease prevention, and secular healing have begun to spread across the Inner Sea. She remains affiliated with the Ocularium, where her work continues to inspire a new generation of scholars seeking to push the boundaries of medicine without the aid of divine intervention. There is a troubling secret, however, to the Candleray derivatives that Cassie herself is not aware of. Candleray is the product of Algolthu design, introduced to her through pact broker Hashim ibn Said as part of a complicated plot few are aware of, and none have puzzled out the full reasons for yet. In any case, Maniquette's embrace of radical thought doesn't stop at magical theory. It is a known hotbed of anti-Pure Legion sentiment, and increasingly, a quiet incubator for firebrand activity. The city's free-thinking culture often comes into conflict with Rahadoum's enforcers of the First Law, particularly in the realm of civil disobedience and underground aid to religious exiles. A notable example is the Rooster's Perch, a public debate club once known for sharp political commentary, but now infamous for spawning a firebrand cell. Led by elderly philosopher Borzel Nikanwan, a local emerging firebrand faction known as the Red Roosters operates from this debate club, orchestrating prison breakouts and covert resettlement efforts for persecuted individuals. Borzel himself is a fascinating figure. Though a critic of many firebrand strategies, he remains a committed ally, using the tools of philosophy and civil disobedience rather than open rebellion. He continues to lecture in Maniquette, publishing tracts under a discreet yet recognizable mark, a pair of crossed quills over the silhouette of a mediating thinker. He walks the fine line between advocacy and illegality, carefully skirting the Pure Legion's reach while never quite retreating. Finally, another key feature of Maniquette is the presence of Rahadoum's only major Pathfinder Society lodge, known as the Swordmeat Lodge. Operated by venture captain Obo, a pragmatic and sharp-witted leader, the lodge functions under constant scrutiny from local authorities. Obo's approach is one of transparency with his agents and diplomacy with the Pure Legion. An expert in Jiskin antiquities, Obo maintains a personal collection of intricate Jiskin puzzle boxes, often used to test new recruits or entertain visiting scholars. Outside of his Pathfinder work, he's a decorated horse trainer, with several best-in-show trophies to his name. While political subversion and arcane innovation define much of Maniquette's modern identity, the city remains a bustling port, still deeply engaged in maritime trade and information exchange. Ships arrive daily from across the Inner Sea, bringing goods, travelers, and the occasional smuggled relic, often destined for research in the Ocularium or vanishing into the hands of more clandestine circles. Maniquette's harbor may not rival Azir's in scale, but its docks are a crossroads for knowledge and rebellion alike. Mirnura. Once the proud capital of the Jiska Imperium, Mirnura stood on the northern coast atop the fallen peninsula, just north of the desolate Path of Salt. Founded by the legendary hero Ariston, and named after his beloved wife, it was the heart and capital of Jiskan power. It was here that Ariston returned from his travels to establish a city built on arcane advancement and planar diplomacy. Mirnura became the primary target in ancient Osirian's campaign to annihilate Jiska, and its destruction was thorough. Osirian forces razed the city, and in a symbolic act of obliteration salted the earth with millions of tons of salt to ensure that nothing would grow in its place. The devastation was so total that the region itself became known as the Path of Salt, a grim reminder of an empire reduced to scorched ruin. To this day, powerful sandstorms occasionally expose fragments of monuments and shattered architecture. Treasure hunters speak in hushed tones of hidden imperial vaults, said to reveal themselves only to those of royal Jiskan descent. Chief among these is the rumored Halite Crypt, said to lie deep beneath the surface and guarded still by a colossal Jiskan behemoth golem named Helatoros, a silent sentinel preserving the final legacy of the Lost Empire. Urspurn. The ruins of Urspurn can be found on the coast close to Karajite. After the fall of the Jiska Imperium, ancient Osirian expanded westwards, and the furthest western extent of their empire in the First Age was Urspurn. Little more is known of the city today, as what remains is ruins and sand. Kari. Located at the northernmost edge of Rahadoum, Kari is a city defined by its contested past and enduring strategic value. Once the southern anchor of the Arch of Aradin, the now ruined bridge that once linked Garand and Avestan, Kari bears the architectural marks of centuries of Chelish occupation. Sturdy Rahadoumi sandstone structures now stand beside imposing Chelish castles built of black and red marble, reflecting a long history of foreign rule. The city was first taken in 4137 by Prince Haliad I of Cheliax, who, desperate to recover his reputation after a failed siege of Absalom, led a campaign into Kari's then impoverished hinterlands. His unopposed victory gave Cheliax control over the Hesperus Strait, one of the Inner Sea's most vital maritime choke points, and helped set the stage for the foundation of the colony of Sargava. Kari remained under Chelish control for over 5 centuries, until the events of the Glorious Reclamation destabilized Cheliax's hold on the region. As Chelish forces were recalled to defend their heartland, Rahadoum seized the opportunity. The Council of Elders, backed by nomadic allies and militias from Azir, Maniket, and Botasani, launched a successful week-long siege, reclaiming the city for the Kingdom of Man. Today, Kari is heavily militarized, its garrisons on constant alert in case Cheliax should seek to reassert control. Today, the city's hybrid architecture and layered identity serve as daily reminders of Rahadoum's resilience against encroaching foreign powers.